Court is back in session in the historic trial of former President Donald Trump. The judge beginning the day by holding a contempt hearing on Trump's alleged violations of the limited gag order in the case. It prohibits statements about witnesses, jurors, and lawyers in the case other than Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. Prosecutors arguing Trump violated that order at least 10 separate occasions this month. The defense arguing the comments were Trump's response to political attacks. The hearing at times combative between the judge and the defense. The judge ultimately saying he would not rule from the bench. Former National Enquirer publisher David Pecker returning to the witness stand this afternoon. Prosecutors saying he was essentially the eyes and ears of the Trump 2016 campaign, saying Pecker told Trump that adult film actress Stormy Daniels had a story that could turn into a sex scandal. Trump has denied having any sexual relationship with Daniels. At Trump's direction, prosecutors say his fixer Michael Cohen wired Daniels $130,000, and then, to hide the true nature of the payment, Trump allegedly decided Cohen's reimbursements should be recorded as legal services. Prosecutors calling it a planned, coordinated, long-running conspiracy to keep the voting public in the dark. But the defense arguing President Trump is innocent. President Trump did not commit any crimes.
This is a case where you pay a lawyer. He's a lawyer. And they call it a legal expense.
And defense attorney Todd Blanche saying Michael Cohen cannot be trusted. He is obsessed with President Trump. He has a goal, an obsession with getting Trump.
Well, this is a criminal conspiracy, according to prosecutors. This isn't just about falsifying business records. This is much bigger. From the defense perspective, they're doing just the opposite. They're trying to narrow this. They're trying to make this seem as small and inconsequential as possible. It's about some records here.
Trump has denied any wrongdoing and pleaded not guilty to a 34-count felony indictment charging him with falsifying business records.
All right, so here we go again. Just when you think the Trump legal saga can't get any more dramatic, just when you think we've seen it all, the whole thing reaches a new level. And this time, it's not just about delays or legal arguments or courtroom theatrics. This time, we're talking about contempt charges. We're talking about a judge threatening jail time, actual jail time, for a sitting president. Let me say that again because it's wild. A judge is threatening to put the president of the United States behind bars if he doesn't stop violating a gag order. Can you even wrap your head around that? Because honestly, I'm still trying to process it myself. So here's what happened. Judge Juan Merchant, the guy overseeing Trump's New York hush money case, held an emergency hearing. And during that hearing, he found Trump in contempt. Again, for the 10th time. The 10th time, people. This isn't a one-off mistake. This isn't Trump accidentally crossing a line he didn't know existed. This is a pattern. A deliberate, repeated pattern of defying what the court told him not to do. And Judge Merchant, he's had enough. He fined Trump $1,000 for this latest violation, and then he said something that made everyone in that courtroom sit up straight. He said that if Trump keeps this up, if he violates the gag order one more time, jail is on the table. Not maybe, not possibly. He said he will impose it if necessary. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. Now let's back up for a second, because I know some of you are wondering, what even is a gag order? And why does Trump keep violating it? Fair questions. So a gag order is basically when a judge tells people involved in a case, you can't talk about certain things publicly. In this case, Judge Merchant told Trump he couldn't make public statements about jurors, witnesses, or the families of the judge and prosecutors. The reasoning is pretty simple. If you're on trial and you start attacking witnesses or intimidating jurors publicly, that's a problem. That undermines the whole justice system. That makes it impossible to have a fair trial. So judges issue these orders to protect the integrity of the process. Makes sense, right? But Trump has been ignoring it repeatedly. He's been posting on Truth Social, his social media platform. He's been making comments in interviews. He's been calling out witnesses by name. He's been suggesting the jury is rigged. He's been attacking the judge's family. And every time he does it, prosecutors file a motion saying, hey, he violated the gag order again. And every time, Judge Merchant has to hold another hearing and issue another fine and give another warning. It's like watching someone poke a bear over and over and then act surprised when the bear finally roars. And here's the thing. The fines clearly aren't working. $1,000 to Trump? That's nothing. That's pocket change. That's less than what he probably spends on a single meal. So the fines aren't a deterrent. They're not changing his behavior. And Judge Merchant knows that. That's why he's escalating. That's why he's now threatening jail. Because what else can he do? If someone keeps breaking the rules and fines don't stop them, the next step is incarceration. That's how the system works for everyone else. And Judge Merchant is basically saying, you're not special. You don't get to ignore court orders just because you're president. But let's talk about what this really means. Because this isn't just about contempt charges or gag orders. This is about something much bigger. This is about whether the rule of law applies to everyone or just to regular people. This is about whether being president puts you above the courts. And this is about optics. Because Trump knows exactly what he's doing. He's not violating the gag order by accident. He's doing it on purpose. And why? Because every time the judge holds him in contempt, every time there's a threat of jail, Trump gets to go to his supporters and say, see, they're trying to silence me. They're trying to throw me in jail because I'm telling the truth. This is political persecution. And you know what? It works. His base eats it up. They see these contempt charges as proof that Trump is being targeted, proof that the deep state is real, proof that the system is rigged against him. So in a twisted way, every contempt charge actually helps Trump politically. It reinforces his narrative. It fires up his supporters. It makes him look like a martyr instead of someone who's just refusing to follow the rules. That's the game here. That's what makes this so complicated. Because Judge Merchant has to enforce the law. He has to maintain order in his courtroom. But every time he does, Trump turns it into a campaign message. So where does this leave us? Well, Judge Merchant said jail is a last resort. He doesn't want to do it. No judge wants to jail a sitting president. Can you imagine the chaos that would cause, the media frenzy, the political fallout? But he also said he will do it if necessary. And that's the key word, necessary. If Trump keeps violating the gag order, if he keeps attacking witnesses and jurors, Judge Merchant might not have a choice. He might have to follow through on his threat. And if that happens, if Trump actually gets locked up even for a few hours, this country is going to lose its mind. Half the country will celebrate, half the country will riot. And Trump will fundraise off it for years. So yeah, contempt charges rush to court, judge threatening jail, Trump defying orders. This is where we are. And it's only going to get crazier from here. All right, so let's dig deeper into what's actually happening here, because this story has layers. On the surface, it looks simple. Trump violated a gag order. Judge held him in contempt. Threat of jail. Done. But when you really break it down, when you look at the specifics in the timeline and the broader context, it gets way more complicated. So let's start with the gag order itself. What exactly is Trump not allowed to say? Judge Merchant's order is pretty specific. Trump cannot make public statements about witnesses in the case. He cannot make statements about jurors or prospective jurors. He cannot make statements about court staff or prosecution staff or their families. And he cannot make statements about the judge's family. That's it. That's the restriction. He can still talk about the case in general terms. He can still claim he's innocent. He can still call it a witch hunt. But he can't target specific people involved in the process. Now you might be thinking, okay, that seems reasonable. Like, why would you need to attack witnesses or jurors anyway? If you're innocent, just let the evidence speak for itself, right? But that's not how Trump operates. Trump's entire strategy in business and in politics and in legal battles has always been to go on offense, to attack his opponents, to control the narrative. And he can't do that if he's not allowed to talk about the people testifying against him. So from his perspective, this gag order is basically tying one hand behind his back. It's limiting his ability to fight back the way he wants to fight back. And Trump hates being limited. He hates being told what he can and can't do. So he keeps pushing. He keeps testing the boundaries. He keeps seeing how far he can go before the judge actually does something serious. And that brings us to the violations. 10 of them so far. 10 times that prosecutors have gone to Judge Merchant and said he did it again. So what did Trump actually say? Well, according to court filings, he's made posts on Truth Social calling witnesses liars. He suggested that the jury was picked unfairly and is biased against him. He's made comments about Michael Cohen, who's one of the key witnesses in this case, calling him a convicted felon and suggesting his testimony is worthless. He's posted articles that identify jurors by their backgrounds and occupations, which prosecutors say is intended to intimidate them. And he's made comments about the judge's daughter, who works in political consulting, suggesting that she has a conflict of interest and that the judge should recuse himself. Each of these things on their own might seem minor, like, okay, he called a witness a liar. So what? Politicians trash talk each other all the time. But in the context of a criminal trial, it's different. Because these aren't just political opponents. These are witnesses under oath. These are jurors deciding his fate. And when someone with Trump's platform, someone with millions of followers, starts attacking these people publicly, it creates real problems. Witnesses might be scared to testify. Jurors might feel intimidated or biased. The whole trial could get compromised. And that's why gag orders exist. That's why judges take violations seriously. But here's where it gets interesting. Because Trump and his lawyers argue that the gag order itself is unconstitutional. They say it violates his First Amendment right to free speech. And they have a point, sort of, because Trump isn't just a defendant, he's also a sitting president. He's a public figure, and public figures have more leeway to speak freely, especially about matters of public interest. So his lawyers argue that he should be allowed to defend himself publicly, that silencing him during a trial is political censorship, that the American people have a right to hear his side of the story. It's a compelling argument if you're sympathetic to Trump, but from the court's perspective, it doesn't hold water, because everyone, even presidents, even public figures, has to follow court rules when they're on trial. The First Amendment doesn't give you the right to intimidate witnesses or taint a jury pool, and that's what Judge Merchan keeps saying. Your right to free speech doesn't override the integrity of this trial. So we've got this clash. Trump insists he's being silenced. The court insists he's being held to the same standard as everyone else, and the violations keep piling up. Now let's talk about the consequences. Judge Merchan has fined Trump $9,000 total for the first 9 violations, $1,000 each, and then this most recent one brought it to 10. But like I said earlier, these fines mean nothing to Trump. He's a billionaire, allegedly. $1,000 fine is like telling a regular person they owe 50 cents. It's not going to change behavior, and Judge Merchan knows that. That's why he escalated. That's why he said in open court that incarceration is now on the table. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said that Trump's continued willful violations are a direct attack on the rule of law, that the court has been more than patient, that fines clearly aren't working, and that if this continues, he will have no choice but to impose jail time. Now think about what that means. A judge threatening to jail a sitting president, that's unprecedented. That's never happened in American history. Sure, presidents have been impeached, presidents have been investigated, but actually jailing one, that's a whole different level. And it raises so many questions. Like logistically, how would that even work? Does the Secret Service go to jail with him? Does he run the country from a cell? Can he be president and incarcerated at the same time? These aren't hypothetical questions anymore. These are real things that people in the legal system are having to think about because Trump keeps pushing. And Judge Merchan keeps saying he'll follow through if he has to. But here's the political angle, and this is crucial. Because Trump isn't just defying the gag order because he's reckless or because he doesn't understand the rules. He's doing it strategically. He's doing it because every time he gets held in contempt, every time the judge threatens jail, it reinforces his narrative. The narrative that he's being persecuted, that the legal system is weaponized against him, that this trial is a sham designed to take him down politically. And his supporters believe it. They see these contempt charges and they don't think, wow, Trump really should follow the rules. They think, wow, the judge really is out to get him. This proves everything Trump has been saying. So in a weird way, Trump benefits from these violations. Each contempt charge becomes a fundraising email. Each threat of jail becomes a rally talking point. He's turning his legal problems into political fuel, and the media plays right into it. Every news outlet covers these contempt hearings. Every cable news show debates whether Trump will actually go to jail. Every social media platform explodes with hot takes and arguments. And all of that attention benefits Trump. It keeps him in the headlines. It keeps people talking about him. And for a politician, especially one like Trump who thrives on attention, that's gold. Even negative attention is better than no attention. So you can see the trap here. Judge Merchan has to enforce the law. He has to maintain order in his courtroom. But every time he does, he's actually helping Trump politically. It's a no-win situation for the court. If they don't hold him accountable, it looks like Trump is above the law. But if they do hold him accountable, he uses it to claim persecution. There's no good option. And that brings us to the bigger question. What happens if Trump actually does go to jail, even for a day, even for a few hours? What would that look like? Well, first, the logistics would be insane. Secret Service would have to secure whatever facility he's held in. There would be massive security concerns. The media circus would be unlike anything we've ever seen. And politically, the country would fracture even more than it already has. Trump's supporters would see it as the ultimate proof that the system is corrupt. His opponents would see it as long overdue accountability. And both sides would be more convinced than ever that they're right and the other side is evil. The division would get worse. The anger would get worse. And Trump would be at the center of it all, exactly where he wants to be. So where does this leave us? Judge Merchan has drawn a line. He said no more violations or jail is coming. Trump has a choice. He can follow the gag order for the rest of the trial, which based on his history seems unlikely, or he can keep pushing and risk becoming the first president in American history to be jailed for contempt. And knowing Trump, knowing how he operates, I'd bet on the latter. Because he's not scared of jail, he's scared of irrelevance. And going to jail, even briefly, would make him the most relevant person in the world. So yeah, this is where we are, and it's only going to get more intense. Okay, so let's break this down into the 3 big takeaways because there's a lot happening here, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page about what this actually means. First takeaway, this is about more than just a gag order. On the surface, yeah, this is a story about Trump violating court rules and facing contempt charges. But zoom out and you'll see this is really about the limits of presidential power. It's about whether someone can be president and also be subject to the same legal consequences as everyone else. Because here's the reality. If you or I violated a gag order 10 times, we'd already be in jail. There wouldn't be 10 warnings. There wouldn't be $9,000 in fines that we could just shrug off. We'd be behind bars after violation number 2, maybe 3 at most. But Trump has gotten 10 chances, 10 warnings, and he's still a free man. Why? Because he's president. Because the courts are terrified of the precedent they set by jailing him. Because no one knows what would happen if they actually followed through. And that creates this impossible situation where Trump can keep pushing because he knows the courts don't really want to jail him. He knows they'll keep issuing warnings and fines and threats, but actually pulling the trigger, actually putting him in a cell, that's a whole different thing. And Trump is banking on them not having the guts to do it. He's calling their bluff. And so far it's working. But Judge Merchant is saying not anymore. The bluff is over. Next violation means jail. And now we wait to see if he actually means it. Because if he doesn't follow through, if Trump violates the gag order again and Merchant backs down, then the whole thing was for nothing. It'll prove that Trump really is above the law. But if Merchant does follow through, if he actually jails Trump, we're entering completely uncharted territory. We're talking constitutional crisis level chaos. Second takeaway, Trump is using this as a political weapon. And I know some of you are thinking, well, yeah, obviously. But I want to really emphasize this because it's important. Trump isn't violating the gag order because he doesn't understand it or because he can't control himself. He's violating it because it helps him politically. Every contempt charge becomes a fundraising opportunity. Every threat of jail becomes proof of persecution. Every news cycle dominated by his legal battles is a news cycle where he's the center of attention. And attention is currency in politics. It doesn't even matter if the attention is negative. What matters is that people are talking about you, that you're dominating the conversation, that you're impossible to ignore. And Trump has mastered that game better than any politician in modern history. His supporters see these contempt charges and they don't think, man, Trump really should follow the rules. They think this is exactly what Trump warned us about. The deep state is real. The system is rigged. They're trying to silence him because he's telling the truth. And every time Judge Merchant holds him in contempt, it reinforces that belief. It makes Trump look like a martyr, like someone who's sacrificing himself to fight corruption. And that's incredibly powerful politically. It's why his fundraising spikes every time he gets indicted or charged or held in contempt. It's why his poll numbers among his base stay rock solid no matter what happens legally. Because to them, this isn't about whether he broke the law. It's about whether he's fighting for them against a corrupt system. And they believe he is. So these contempt charges, which are supposed to be punishments, actually strengthen his political position. It's wild when you think about it. Third takeaway, the legal system is at a breaking point. And I don't mean that in a dramatic way. I mean it literally. The courts are struggling to deal with Trump because he doesn't play by the normal rules. Most defendants, when they're on trial, they listen to their lawyers. They follow court orders. They try to stay out of trouble. Even if they're guilty, even if they plan to appeal, they generally respect the process while it's happening. But Trump doesn't do that. He attacks the process. He attacks the judge. He attacks the witnesses. He makes a mockery of the whole thing. And the courts don't really have tools to deal with that. They have fines, which don't work on billionaires. They have gag orders, which Trump ignores. And they have jail, which they're terrified to use because of the political implications. So what's left? How do you enforce rules on someone who's immune to fines and willing to go to jail for the political benefit it brings? That's the question Judge Merchant is wrestling with. That's the question every judge handling Trump cases is wrestling with. And honestly, I don't think they have a good answer because the system was built assuming that people, even powerful people, would have some basic respect for the law, some basic understanding that you can't just do whatever you want. But Trump doesn't operate that way. He pushes every boundary. He tests every limit. He sees rules as suggestions. And when you have someone like that, someone who's also president with massive political support and unlimited resources, the system starts to break down. It starts to show its cracks. And we're watching that happen in real time. So what happens next? Well, the trial continues. Trump will probably keep posting on Truth Social. He'll probably keep making comments in interviews and at rallies. And prosecutors will probably keep filing contempt motions. And Judge Merchant will have to decide, do I follow through on my threat? Do I actually jail a sitting president? Or do I issue another warning, another fine, and hope that somehow this time it works? It's an impossible position. If he jails Trump, half the country erupts. If he doesn't, he looks weak, and Trump gets to keep breaking rules with no consequences. There's no good option here, no clean solution, just different shades of chaos. And that's what makes this so fascinating and so terrifying at the same time, because we're not just watching a trial, we're watching a stress test of American democracy. We're watching what happens when someone with enough power and enough support decides to just ignore the rules And we're finding out that our systems, our checks and balances, our institutions, they're not as strong as we thought they were. They're not built to handle someone like Trump, someone who's willing to blow past every norm and every precedent without hesitation. And the cracks are showing. The stress is showing. And it's not clear if the system can handle much more of it. But here's what I keep coming back to. This moment, right now, this is a test of whether the rule of law actually means something in America. Because if Trump can violate a gag order 10 times and face no real consequences, then what does that say? It says that if you're rich enough, if you're powerful enough, if you're president, the rules don't apply to you. And if that's true, if that's the message we're sending, then we've got bigger problems than just one contempt charge or one gag order violation. We've got a fundamental problem with how justice works in this country, and I don't know how you fix that. I don't know how you put that genie back in the bottle. So yeah, contempt charges rush to court, judge threatening jail, Trump defying orders and using it as political fuel. This is the reality we're living in. And the scary part, this might just be the beginning. Because if Trump gets away with this, if he faces no real consequences for contempt, what's next? What other rules will he break? What other boundaries will he push? And at what point does anyone, actually hold him accountable? Those are the questions we should be asking. Those are the questions that matter. Because this isn't just about Trump anymore. This is about what kind of country we want to be. A country where laws apply to everyone equally, or a country where power puts you above the law. We're about to find out which one we are. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to know the answer. Stay tuned, because if you thought this was intense, just wait. We're nowhere near the end of this story. Nowhere close. And every day, it gets more complicated, more chaotic, and more consequential. This is history happening in real time, and we're all watching it unfold, one contempt charge at a time.